Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a fascinating journey straight into the heart of chaos. We're going to look at catastrophic fires and massive transportation disasters, but not as random, uncontrollable events. Instead, we're looking through the underlying physics that actually drive them. Because by viewing these terrifying events through a scientific lens, we can figure out exactly how experts manage and ultimately survive the extreme forces at play.
Okay, let's dive into this. Disasters follow the laws of physics, not human intentions. That right there is our core thesis for this whole explainer. You know, when a massive catastrophe strikes, it's so easy for us to just write it off as terrible luck, a freak accident, or an act of God. But honestly, these are highly predictable physical phenomena. They are strictly bound by the laws of science. And the really beautiful thing about science is that once you deeply understand those laws, we can actually take control.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, the physics of crisis. Second, unpacking the fire tetrahedron. Third, high-rises and ember storms. Fourth, transportation and kinetic energy. And finally, number 5, the 5-sector framework.
Let's start with Section 1, the physics of crisis.
To really get a handle on managing a major emergency, we absolutely have to shift our mindset. We've got to move away from just a reactive response, showing up with sirens blaring long after the damage is done, and shift toward proactive safety. And the only way to do that is by understanding the true root cause of the destruction: energy. Now, on the surface, a burning traditional market and a massive highway pileup seem like totally different emergencies, right? You'd think they have literally nothing in common. But they actually share a fundamental physical connection. They both involve the sudden, violent, and catastrophic release of extreme energy. With fires, it's chemical energy rapidly converting into intense heat. With crashes, it's kinetic energy, the energy of mass in motion, just coming to a violent halt. So managing these disasters really means understanding how to control these specific types of energy transfers.
Moving on to Section 2, unpacking the fire tetrahedron. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we focus specifically on the mechanics of chemical energy. Because when it comes to fire, disaster managers actually view flames completely differently than the rest of us do. They move way past that basic fire triangle we all learned in grade school and rely on the fire tetrahedron. So it includes fuel, heat, and oxygen, sure, but it adds a totally crucial fourth element: the chemical chain reaction. Why does that matter? Well, some of our most advanced extinguishing agents don't just cool the fire with water or smother it. They work purely by breaking that specific chemical chain reaction at a microscopic level. Break just one of those 4 interconnected sides, and the entire structure of the fire just collapses.
The thing is, chemical energy doesn't always burn at some steady, predictable pace, right? It can behave in truly terrifying ways. Take what firefighters call the 2 silent killers. First, we have a flashover. This is an absolute nightmare scenario where radiant heat builds up in a closed space until literally everything in the room, the furniture, the carpet, the paint on the walls, just ignites simultaneously in one massive wave of flame. Contrast that with a backdraft. This happens when a fire is actually dying down because it's starved of oxygen in a sealed room. It looks totally calm from the outside, but if a first responder opens a door and introduces sudden oxygen, boom, it causes a violent, explosive ignition. Both of these are sudden, catastrophic transitions that show just how volatile chemical energy really is.
Section 3, high-rises and ember storms.
All right, let's take this theoretical physics out of the lab and into the real world. We need to see how this energy behaves in the complex environments we actually live in. Let's bust a huge myth right now. When a high-rise catches fire, your human instinct probably screams, "Run for the exit immediately." But we have to deal with a terrifying physical phenomenon called the stack effect. In tall buildings, elevator shafts and stairwells act exactly like a giant chimney. Superheated, toxic smoke rises incredibly fast through these central cores. Because of this, the hallways and stairwells frequently become way deadlier than the individual apartments. That is exactly why modern high-rise safety plans often rely on a defend-in-place strategy. Staying put behind a heavy, closed, fire-rated door is often the safest scientific choice you can possibly make.
And what about when nature meets our front door? We call this the Wildland-Urban Interface, or WII for short. In certain regions, like the Mambila Plateau or around Abuja in Nigeria, disaster managers face a really unique threat: ember storms. High winds can literally pick up burning pieces of vegetation, called firebrands, and carry them for kilometers ahead of the actual fire line. These embers land in dry gutters or on roofs, and they ignite spot fires totally independent of the main blaze. Your house could catch fire long before you even see the primary wall of flames.
Crazy, right?
30 meters. Now that's not just a random guess. That is the exact scientifically proven amount of defensible space needed around structures. By proactively clearing away dry brush, wood, and external fuels for a 30-meter radius around a home, we effectively neutralize the threat of those ember storms. It basically starves the airborne firebrands of fuel when they land, and, crucially, it gives firefighters a safe buffer zone to actually stand their ground and defend the property.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds transportation and kinetic energy.
As we shift gears from chemical energy to things that move, the physics of the disaster completely changes. We use the word accident all the time for crashes, but honestly, that word completely fails to capture the immense physics at play. A commercial jet, or even a heavily loaded fuel tanker moving at highway speeds, carries kinetic energy equivalent to a small bomb. When a crash happens, it is not just a simple accident, it's a massive, unbelievably violent transfer of kinetic energy into the environment. And managing a disaster of that scale, that's not a job for just one local agency. It requires a highly complex, multi-jurisdictional response to handle the rescue, the hazardous materials, and the mass fatalities.
And with these kinetic disasters, time is arguably our absolute biggest enemy. 1 hour. In emergency medicine, this is famously known as the golden hour. It's that critical window right after severe trauma where rapid medical intervention has the absolute highest chance of saving someone's life. But here's the tragic reality of transportation disasters, especially aviation crashes. They often happen in remote, incredibly tough-to-reach locations. That precious golden hour just ticks away relentlessly while rescuers are struggling through treacherous terrain or bad weather, just trying to get to the site.
But kinetic disasters aren't just those rare, high-profile aviation events. We really have to confront what the source material calls the neglected epidemic. Road traffic crashes are frequent, ongoing mass casualty disasters. In places like Nigeria, these horrific crashes are literally happening daily. And we've got to recognize something vital here. We have to stop blaming this purely on bad luck or just poor individual driving. These frequent tragedies represent deep, systemic failures: poor infrastructure, bad road design, and a total lack of safety enforcement. To treat this epidemic, we have to stop just shrugging our shoulders and demand a much more serious, scientific approach to road management.
Section 5, the 5-sector framework.
So the crucial point is that whether we're dealing with a chemical inferno or a multi-car pileup, we need a way to immediately bring order to the chaos. This 5-sector framework is the ultimate management solution that empowers experts to do exactly that. Responding to a disaster is never improvised. It is a strictly ordered, heavily pre-practiced plan. First, Sector 1 tackles scene management, locking down physical safety perimeters. Second, medical teams do triage to rapidly sort the injured based on survivability. Third is extrication, where specialized teams use heavy tools like the jaws of life to carefully free trapped victims. Fourth is transportation, coordinating ambulances so patients get to the right hospitals without overwhelming local ERs. And finally, Sector 5 handles the heartbreaking but completely necessary work of morgue management and family reunification. When chaos strikes, every single responder knows their exact role in these 5 logical steps.
And this brings us right back full circle to the power of proactive safety. By understanding the uncompromising physics of fire and kinetic impact, we can confidently put proactive measures in place. We can strictly enforce modern building codes with sprinklers to stop fires from spreading. We can design smarter roads that physically absorb kinetic energy instead of transferring it to the passengers inside. We can train our responders in the standardized 5-sector system. Executing these specific steps completely removes that acts of God excuse. It puts the power back in our hands to actively build highly resilient, structurally safer communities.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Are we treating disasters in our own communities as unavoidable tragedies or as manageable physics? The next time you see a new high-rise going up in your city, or you're just driving down the local highway, I really challenge you to view it through this new scientific lens. Are those 30-meter defensible spaces actually in place? Are we genuinely prepared to manage the energy? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the tough questions, stay intensely curious about the science around you, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to unpack the fascinating systems that shape our world.